In the vast majority of these cases, the banks did not repay the customers.
That's suspicious.
A common example of the latter is the zelle fraud scam. Hello, my name is Marc Drouinaud Jr. It is rare that banks are starting to reimburse victims that got their money stolen by a hacker. Today, I'm going to discuss why and how that is the case. Let's get right into it. We're going dark. This story is courtesy of Krebs on Security. So when U.S. consumers have their online bank accounts hijacked and plundered by hackers, U.S. financial institutions are legally obligated to reverse any unauthorized transactions as long as the victim reports the fraud in a timely manner. But new data released this week suggests that for some of the nation's largest banks, reimbursing account takeover victims has become more of the exception than the rule. The findings came in a report released by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who in April 2022 opened an investigation into fraud tied to Zelle, the peer-to-peer digital payment service used by many financial institutions that allows customers to quickly send cash to friends and family. Zelle is run by Early Warning Services, LLC, which is a private financial services company, which is jointly owned by Bank of America, Capital One, JPMorgan Chase, PNC Bank Truist U.S. Bank, and Wells Fargo. Zelle is enabled by default for customers at over 1,000 different financial institutions, even if a great many customers still don't know it's there. Senator Warren said several of the EWS owner banks, including Capital One, JPMorgan, and Wells Fargo, failed to provide all of the requested data. But Warren did get the requested information from PNC, Truist, and U.S. Bank. Overall, the three banks that provided complete data sets reported 35,848 cases of scams, involving over 25.9 million of payments in 2021 and the first half of 2022, the report summarized. In the vast majority of these cases, the banks did not repay the customers that reported being scammed. Overall, these three banks reported repaying customers in only 3,473 cases, representing nearly 10% of scam claims, and repaid only 2.9 million. Importantly, the report distinguishes between cases that involve straight-up bank account takeovers and unauthorized transfers, which is fraud, and those losses that stem from fraudulently induced payments, where the victim is tricked into authorizing the transfer of funds to scams. A common example of the latter is the Zelle fraud scam, which uses an ever-shifting set of commands to trick people into transferring money to fraudsters. The Zelle fraud scam often employs text messages and phone calls spoofed to look like they came from your bank, and the scam usually relates to fooling the customer into thinking they're sending money to themselves when they're really sending it to the crooks. So here's the rub. When a customer issues a payment order to their bank, the bank is obligated to honor that order so long as it passes a two-stage test. The first question asks, did the request actually come from an authorized owner or signer on the account? In the case of Zelle scams, the answer is yes. Trace Fushi, who's a strategic advisor in the anti-money laundering practice at IT Nova Rica, said the largest stage requires banks to give the customer's transfer order a kind of sniff test using commercially reasonable fraud controls that generally are not designed to detect patterns involving social engineering. Fushi said that the legal phrase commercially reasonable is the primary reason why no bank has much, if anything, in the way of controlling for scam detection. In order for them to deploy something that would detect a good chunk of fraud on something so hard to detect they would generate egregiously high rates of false positives, which would also make consumers and then regulators very unhappy, Fushi said. This would tank the business case for the service as a whole, rendering it something that the bank can claim to not be commercially reasonable. Senator Warren report makes clear that banks generally do not pay consumers back if they are fraudulently induced into making Zelle payments. In simple terms, Zelle indicated that it would provide redress for users in cases of unauthorized transfers in which a user's account is accessed by a bad actor and used to transfer a payment, the report continued. However, EWS response also indicated that neither Zelle nor its parent bank owners would reimburse users fraudulently induced by a bad actor into making a payment on the platform. Still, the data suggests banks did not repay at least some of the funds stolen from scam victims, about 10% of the time. Fushi said he's surprised that the number is so high. That banks are paying victims of authorized payment fraud scams anything at all is noteworthy, he said. That's money that they're paying out out of pocket almost entirely for goodwill. You could argue that repaying all victims is a sound strategy, especially in the climate we're in, but to say that it should be what all banks do remains an opinion until Congress changes the law. Unauthorized fraud. So let's talk about unauthorized fraud. However, when it comes to reimbursing victims of fraud and account takeovers, the report suggests banks are stiffing their customers whenever they can get away with it. Overall, the 4 banks that provided complete data sets indicated that they reimbursed only 47% of the dollar amount of fraud claims they received, the report notes. How did the banks behave individually? Here's from the report. In 2021 and the first 6 months of 2022, PNC Bank indicated that its customers reported 10,683 cases of unauthorized payments totaling over 10.6 million. Of which only 1,495 cases, totaling 1.46 million, were refunded to consumers. PNC Bank left 86% of its customers that reported cases of fraud without recourse for fraudulent activity that occurred on Zelle. Over this same time period, U.S. bank customers reported a total of 28,642 cases of unauthorized transactions, totaling over 16.2 million, where only refunding 8,242 cases, totaling less than 4.7 million. In the period between January 2021 and September 2022, the Bank of America customers reported 81,797 cases of unauthorized transactions, totaling 125 million. Bank of America refunded only 56.1 million in fraud claims, less than 45% of the overall dollar value of claims made in that time. Truist indicated that the bank had a much better record of reimbursing defrauded customers over this same time period. During 2021 and the first half of 2022, Truist customers filed 24,752 unauthorized transaction claims amounting to 24.4 million. Truist reimbursed 20,349 of those claims, totaling 20.8 million. 82% of Truist claims were reimbursed over this period. Overall, however, the 4 banks that provided complete data sets indicated that they reimbursed only 47% of the dollar amount of fraud claims they received. Fushi said that there has long been a great deal of inconsistency in how banks reimburse unauthorized fraud claims. Even after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, came out with guidance on what qualifies as an unauthorized fraud claim. Many banks reported that they are still living up to those standards, he said. As a result, I imagine that CFPB will come down hard on those with fines and we'll see a correction. Fushi said many banks have recently adjusted their reimbursement policies to bring them more into line with the CFPB's guidance from last year. So this is heading in the right direction, but not with sufficient vigor and speed to satisfy critics, he said. Seth Rudin is a payments fraud expert who serves as director of global advisory for digital identity company BioCatch. Rudin said Zelle has recently made significant changes to its fraud program oversight because of consumer influence. It is clear to me that despite sensational headlines, progress has been made to improve outcomes, Rudin said. Presently, losses in the network on a volume adjusted basis are lower than those typical of credit cards. But he said any failure to reimburse victims of fraud and account takeovers only adds to pressure on Congress to do more to help victims of those scammed into authorizing Zelle payments. So, what do you think? Man, only a portion of people who actually get their monies taken from their accounts get reimbursed. I appreciate your viewership. I love you. Mwah. You a hack pack. You a hack pack. Please click that subscription. Please hit the notification bell. You a hack pack. Stay safe, hack pack. You a hack pack. Stay safe, hack pack.